In this video, we're going to build a small API using the Fastify framework in Node.js, and we're going to learn how to customize the Pino.js logger that comes with the framework in order to ship our request logs to the BetterStack platform. And in order to do that, we're going to learn how to integrate Fastify with the BetterStack Pino.js transport in order to ship those logs to the platform. So let's get started. Now I've got the documentation for Fastify open here, and you can see that it's a fast and low overhead web framework for Node.js. And this is an alternative to frameworks like Express for building server-side applications and APIs. And we can get some installation instructions if we scroll down here. So we have a quick start, and we'll leave a link to that below the video, and we can run the npm install Fastify command. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to go over to VS Code, and we have a project open here. It contains a single file called server.js, and that's currently empty. What we can do at the bottom is we can run the npm init-y command. That's going to initialize a Node.js project in this directory, and that creates the package.json file that we see on the left hand side. Now once we've got that file, we can run the npm install Fastify command, and that's going to install Fastify and all of its dependencies, and these dependencies include Pino.js, the logging framework. And to see that, we can look at node modules, and if we scroll down here, you can see all of these packages that have been installed, including Fastify itself. If we go down further, we can see that it has Pino.js as well as some other Pino utilities. These have all been installed into this Node.js project, and we're ready to start developing in the server.js file. Now in order to get started, I'm going to create a new file here called data.javascript, and what we're going to do in here is we're going to define some fake data, some synthetic data that we're going to use in this video. So I've created a variable here called data, and we're exporting that from the file, and it contains some JavaScript objects, and each object represents a band. So we have bands like the Rolling Stones, De La Soul, Taylor Swift and Miles Davis. So these are the bands, this is the data that we're going to use in this Fastify application. We're going to go back to server.js, and at the top we can import that data. So let's import data, and that's going to be from that file, and that's data.js. And what we're also going to do at the top is import Fastify, and that's going to be from the Fastify package. And that's coming from node modules because we're referencing the name of the package, and it's not a relative import. Once we've got Fastify, what we can do is create the Fastify object. So I'm going to create a variable here called Fastify, and what we're going to do is instantiate that object that we've imported, and we can pass a dictionary or a JavaScript object of configuration to that object. And we're going to pass a single key at the moment, and we're going to say logger true. And what this means is that when we create a Fastify application, it's going to create that Pino.js logger by default. Pino.js is the default logging package that's used by Fastify, and to get it set up in the default manner, we just need to specify logger as true. And once we've done that, we can create some routes in the application. So fastify.get in order to send a GET request, and we provide a URL path to that. So let's say we're going to get all of the bands at the /bands endpoint. We have the path of /bands, and then we can pass the callback function that takes the request and the reply, and then we can define the logic for this endpoint within that function. So let's define the logic now, and we're going to very simply just send back the data that we have. So I'm going to use the reply.send method, and we're going to pass that data that we imported from the other file, and that's going to return that data as JSON to the client. So it's very simple to set up Fastify endpoints here. We have a single endpoint, and now we're going to use the fastify.listen function to actually create the server. So we're going to listen, and we're going to pass port 3000 through to that. And once we've added the listen call, what we can do is run the server, and we're going to use Node.js for this. Of course, you need to have Node.js and npm installed to do this tutorial. We're going to run the server.js file, and I'm getting an error here. Now this is an interesting error. It says that we cannot use an import statement outside of a module. Now when you initialize a Node.js project, we can go to the package.json file. We can tell Node.js that we want to use the module style of imports by adding a new key and value to the package.json file. So the key is going to be type, and the value here is going to be module. Now you can see the two options here. The default value is common.js, which is using the require statement in JavaScript. This one is going to use module, and that is going to allow us to use these imports that you see at the top of server.js. So once we've added that, we can go back to the terminal here, and I'm going to rerun this, and we're going to see that we get some logging output here. And this logging output is actually coming from Pino.js. We get the level, and we get timestamps and so on, and this is in JSON format. And what I'm going to do is go to the browser, and I'm going to go to localhost 3000, and we're going to go to the /bands endpoint, and hopefully we're going to see a list of bands coming back based on the data that we defined here. So let's go to the browser, and you can see the URL localhost 3000, and we get back that data for the bands. So everything seems to be working at the moment. What we're going to do now is we're going to add a package called nodemon that's going to allow us to restart the server automatically when our code changes. So let's stop the Fastify server here, and I'm going to run the npm install nodemon package. And you can see that's now finished installing. We're going to go to the nodemon page and very quickly have a look at this. We can see that nodemon is a tool that helps when you develop Node.js applications by automatically restarting the Node app when file changes in the directory are detected. So nodemon is basically going to start the server, but it's also going to monitor the code that we have in this directory to see whenever anything is changed, and then it's going to restart the server when it detects that change. So in order to do this, what I'm going to do is go to package.json, and I'm going to add a new script to this file. So let's go down here and add a new script called dev, and we're going to run the nodemon utility that we just installed, and we just pass it the name of the file that we want to run, and that's server.js. And in order to run that command, we can go to the terminal and we can use the npm run dev command. That's going to start the server using nodemon, and you can see that output here that's been generated. It's been generated by nodemon, and if we go back to server.js, and if I just save this file, you can see that the server is restarting. Now what we're going to do is show how to create a Fastify plugin and extract the roots that we have in this application to that plugin. So what I'm going to do on the left hand side is create a file here called roots.js, and we're going to move the roots that we have into this file. Now I'm going to go to the documentation on plugins. When you use Fastify, plugins allow you to extend its functionality. Now a plugin can be anything. It can be a set of roots, it can be a server decorator, and it can be many other options as well. What we're going to use on the Fastify object is the register function, and we can register a plugin that we write in that function. If we go to the right hand side to the create a plugin page, you can see that creating a plugin is very easy. We just need to create a function that takes 3 parameters, and we export that function from a file and then register it with FastAPI. Let's now see an example of this. If we go back to the roots.js file, what I'm going to do at the top here is import that data from data.js, and that has to be from a relative import here. And then below that, we're going to create a function and we're going to export it as well. So export default, and this is going to be an async function called routes. And that's going to take 2 options as per the plugin documentation. It's going to take the Fastify instance and also the options that we can pass to this. And then we define the logic, and in this case, it's going to be the roots within that function. So what I'm going to do now is go back to server.js, and we're going to take that route that we defined earlier, and we're going to cut it out of this file, and we're going to bring it back into the routes.js file. So let's move that in here. So we have a container function in here, and we can define any number of Fastify routes within that function, and that function, the top level function, is exported. We can then go back to server.js, and we no longer need this data import at the top. So what I'm going to do is actually replace this. We're going to import the routes from the routes.js file. So we've created and exported a function here, and we're going to now register that with the Fastify instance. We can do that with fastify.register, and we just pass that function into that. Now I'm going to quickly verify that this is all still working. If we go back to this page here and refresh the page, you can see we still get back the bands. Let's now create one more endpoint in this application. If we go back to routes.js, all we need to do is define another route within this exported function. So it's going to be fastify.get, and let's say we wanted to get a band by its ID. So it's going to be /bands, and then we're going to use a dynamic parameter in the URL in order to get the URL for a band. Now the handler for this, let's make it an async function that takes again the request and the reply objects. Now we can get the ID from the URL, so I'm going to create a variable called ID, and we're going to get that from the request.params. So request.params, that contains any dynamic parameters that are defined in the URL pattern that we have here, and we've got one called ID, so we can then extract that from the object using this syntax here. What we're then going to do is we're going to look for a band that has that ID. So let's look at this data here. Every single band has an ID, which is a number. We're going to iterate over all of this data and try and extract the correct band based on the ID in the URL. So let's try and do that just now and create an object called band. We're going to take the data that we have, and we're going to use the array.find method in JavaScript. and we can pass a function into that that's going to define the logic of the search in this particular array. So we're going to take each band and we're going to look at the ID for that band and check if it's equal to the ID that we've pulled out of the URL. So this is either going to return a band, the first one that matches this ID, or it's going to return undefined. We can check that with an if statement. So if we don't have a band, we can perform some kind of logic here when we haven't found a band. So what we want to do in that case is we want to return a 404 not found, and we also want to take the reply object and we're going to use Pino.js to log out a message here. So reply.log will give you access to the Pino.js logger, and we can then call log level methods such as .error. And I'm going to pass a template string in here, no band with ID, and we can reference the ID that we've got in the URL. So if we don't find a band, we're going to log this using Pino.js, and then we're going to return a response. So we're going to return reply.status, and I'm going to pass a status of 404 into that, and then we can call the .send method, and we can pass any kind of dictionary here, any kind of object. So let's say message, and I'm going to copy this message from above and paste it into here. Now if we have found a band, we're going to go below this if statement, and this if statement will return the response, so we can write the rest of the logic here below the if statement. What we're going to say is reply.send, and let's just send back that band if we've found one in the array. So that's going to take that band, convert it to JSON, and send that as a response to the client. Let's now test this out. I'm going to go back to the browser, and this is the band list page. You can see we're still getting all of the bands. If we add a dynamic path to that URL, let's say 1 for the Rolling Stones. Let's add that now, and you can see we still get back some data, and this data represents the band with that ID. And we can change that to something else, let's say 4, and we get back the band for that one, which is Miles Davis. If we set it to something that doesn't exist, we get back the message no band with that ID. Let's move on and see how to customize the Pino.js logger when we're using it with a Fastify application. And we're also going to see how we can send our logs to different sources, such as the BetterStack log platform. Now we can customize the logger. If we go back to the server.js file, at the top when we define the Fastify instance, instead of just setting logger to true, we can actually set that to a configuration object. And we can specify options here, such as the level. We can set that to debug or any of the other valid levels. If we look at the logs that are output on the console below here, you can see a log level of 30 here, which represents an info output. And below that we have 50 for error outputs. If we change the level here, let's say we change it to warn. When we save this, nodemon is going to reload our server, but we're going to see that the level 30 messages are disappearing. And that's because they do not have the severity level that is defined in the application. So if we go back to this page and refresh the page, we're still going to get the output at level 50. But the level 30 messages, when we start the server, they have a level of info, and that is now a level below what we're setting on the logger, which is warn. So in order to see those, we need to set that back to info, and you can see when it refreshes the server that we then get that output. So we can easily customize the log level on the Fastify logger. If we wanted to log our output to a file, we can pass a file key into this, and let's set that to server.log. Now if we save that, we expect to see a server.log file appearing on the left hand side, and you can see that here at the bottom. If we open that, you can see our JSON log outputs are now being sent to this file. So they are no longer being sent to the console, as you can see below here. They're now being outputted to a file. Now what we're going to do now to finish the video is we're going to add a transport that's going to allow us to send the logs to BetterStack. And this has many benefits. It allows you to centralize your logs for different services on a single platform, and it allows you to analyze those logs much more effectively than you would be able to do if your logs were spread across different files on different servers and so on. So what we need to install here in order to send our logs to BetterStack is the BetterStack Pino.js transport. So let's go to the documentation, and we're going to go down to this section here, and I'll leave a link to this below the video. If we go to the Pino transport, you can see how we can use this. So what we're going to do is install it using npm. So let's copy that command and go back to VS Code and stop the server. We're going to paste the npm install command here, and that's going to install that within this node project. And while that's installing, what we need to do is we need to go back here and set up a Pino logger with the logtail transport, and we're going to need a token in order to do that. Now I'm going to go to the BetterStack platform, and we're going to create a source here, And that source is going to be the one for this Fastify application. It's going to consolidate all of the logs in this application into a central location. Now let's create that. At the top right here, we can click Connect Source, and I'm going to call this one Fastify Demo. And the platform for this, we can search for the platform we need. And in this case, it's going to be a JavaScript Node.js application. When we click Create Source, we're taken to this page where we have a source token. Let's copy that and go back to VS Code. Now I'm going to go to server.js and just define the token at the top here. And in a real application, you would want to extract this to an environment file or something more secure. You certainly don't want to commit these tokens to GitHub or other platforms. So make sure this is in a secure location and then load it into your application from that location. Now you can see at the bottom the installation of that transport has finished. So the question is, how do we use that transport? Let's go back to the documentation that we were on for that transport. What we need to do is we need to add a transport to our Pino logger that has a target set to that package that we just installed. So what I'm going to do is just copy this configuration object here, and we're going to go back to our application, and I'm going to remove the file here that we have, and I'm going to define a new key called transport and set that equal to an object. And the object here is the one we've just copied from the documentation. So it's the logtail/Pino package that we just installed, and we also pass the source token in the options. And we're setting that equal to the token that we've hard-coded into this file. So let's restart the server with npm run dev. And I'm going to go to some pages in this application. So let's go back here, and I'm going to try and find some bands that don't exist, and then maybe a couple of requests that are going to return some valid data. And once I've done that, the bands that have not been found in the data that we have, they are going to send the logs to BetterStack. Why is that? If we go back to routes.js, that's because we have this logging statement here on the reply instance. So when we don't find a band from the list, we're going to log out a message of the severity level error, and we're expecting to see that appearing on the BetterStack console. So let's test that out now. If we go back to BetterStack, and we need to go to this source that we have here, we're going to go to the live tail that you see on the left hand side, and you can now see we're getting some logs being sent from our Fastify application to the BetterStack log platform. At the top you can see the logs from when the server was started. They have a level of info, and you can see some levels of error here when we are searching for a band in the URL that does not exist in our database. And we can expand that out to find some more information here. And we can see the level and the message and the host name and other details here. And we can search for any kind of requests that are returning a 404 not found. So if I go to the top here, we have a search bar. If I look at the response object, you can see there's a property on that called status code. So we can look at that and we can find any response with a particular status. So let's say 404. If we search for that, you can see we get back any requests that were completed that had a response status code of 404, and that's coming directly from the Pino logger and from the Fastify application. All of our log output is being collected though, and it's being sent to this central location, and we can then search for useful information such as what pages, what requests are returning a status code of 404. Now let's finish this video with a final example here. We're going to go back to server.js. We've configured a single transport here, but what if you wanted to configure multiple transports? For example, you might want to ship your logs to BetterStack, but you also might want to send that output to a file as well. Now there's a way to do that here if we change what's referenced in the transport key. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this out for the moment, and I'm going to define a new object here, and it's going to have a key of targets, and the targets are going to be set to a JavaScript array. And that's going to be an array of objects. Each object represents a single transport that's going to be used by Pino.js to send the log output to particular locations. So we're going to keep the BetterStack target here, but we're also going to add a second one that's going to send the log output to the console. In order to do that, we can go down and we can specify the target, and we're going to set that equal to a target of Pino/file. And then we can just save that because the default location for a file is actually standard output. And you can see it's already output some of the logs here to the terminal. And if we go back to the browser here, we've got this message here, no band with that particular ID. I'm going to change that at the top, and you can see we get a new message here, but it's the same kind of 404 not found page. If we go back to the terminal, that's all being logged out here. So our logs are going to the terminal via the Pino/file transport. but they should also be sent to BetterStack. So let's verify that by going back to the browser and going to the platform. We're going to look at the live tail, and you can see we're still getting these messages at the bottom here. No band with that ID, and we're still getting that same output. So on this BetterStack platform, we can search through the logs, we can see what kind of data we've got, and we can filter down that data and see some of the interesting examples that we have in our log outputs and any interesting events that have occurred. And that's all for this video. We've shown how to build a very small API using Fastify and how to send the log outputs from that API to the BetterStack platform. We've seen that the Pino.js logger is built into Fastify by default. We just need to specify the logger key in the options that we pass to Fastify. If you're interested in any more content like this, let us know in the comments, and it would be amazing if you would subscribe to the BetterStack channel and support us as we put more content out there. And also if you would give the video a thumbs up if you've enjoyed this content. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.